So you can do this. People don't understand this. When you focus on coming into non-gender, that is beyond the boundaries of male and female, it's not like you lose your aspect of sexuality. It's quite interesting because all people are a blend of masculine and feminine. And if you are denying any aspect of yourself that is either or energy, then you've got a little bit of an issue going. But it's possible to orient yourself towards non-gender while at the same time celebrating the genders that we are expressing in their healthiest form. That's the key right there. What is the healthiest of that which is female? What is the healthiest of that which is male? Because until you embrace your original decision that you made, which is to come in the sex that you came in, you are in an aspect of self-denial and self-hate. That's why sometimes, even though the goal, of course, is to get past that which separates us, which gender is a separational idea.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though that's the goal, it's very beneficial for women to first embrace what they, that one expression of female that they came in, or men to embrace that energy of the thing they chose to come in on, which is male. But you got to ask yourself the question. Don't let society decide for you. What is masculine energy? What is female energy?
Yeah.
Because, right now the current society would have you believe that feminine energy is weakness and masculine energy is some sort of misogynistic warmongering, but that's totally inaccurate as to the true energy of these extremes.
Right. An old teacher once shared with me, when you shift from being a sexual being into a spiritual being, that's when things even out. When we come into this spiritual being, which is both. I mean, you had a mother and a father.
Yes.
Right? And they, through their love or excitement or whatever, created you. So we're both. And if we deny that, some call it the twin flame within, when those two unite within you, the masculine and feminine aspect. And when they come together, then you're out of duality.
Yes. In
your own mind.
Oh yes, but you can't even get to that space until you embrace either aspect. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so divine feminine energy is all about balance. It's about healing. It's about rebirth and renewal. It's about restoration. That is the female divine energy. So if you think about, that's why you can associate Earth, the divine mother, basically, of Earth. Think about the qualities that Earth has. That is the qualities of divine feminine. It's an incredibly receptive energy, whereas masculine is an incredibly proactive energy. It's about creation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's both about creation. And most of us are in sphere loops and we're not creating anything, right? That awareness that we have is like the great sun, whatever we put our awareness on becomes more. And to learn to put our awareness on whether it's divine masculine, divine feminine, put our awareness on what it is that we want to birth into reality.
Yes.
We're still those original creators of reality. It's just we've disassociated ourselves so far back from it, right? And allowed these stories and different things about who you are, right? I mean, the very fact that somebody comes, you go to see somebody, whoever it is, some sort of doctor, therapist, whatever, and within 15 minutes they know that they have told you who you are. I mean, the only one that really knows that is you. You've been in this body for 25, 30, 40, 50 years. It's you that knows, right?
Yes, you just sometimes don't know,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
We're taught to avoid ourselves as people quite a bit, especially I don't know about men, but especially females, I feel like. That's the experience I know in this life so well. I was born into a very cowboy type of a culture, basically, where females, they get every ounce of weakness beaten out of them from day one, that your best chance at survival is basically to get rid of anything that's female about you. That's why they call it sort of the cowboy mean culture, where, the cowgirls they may embrace their sexuality, but their sexuality is used sort of more like a control technique than it is like a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like even their sexuality has been turned almost to a masculine degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was just like in that culture, the first day, I was 15 when I got my first period, and I remember just crying. I cried so hard the first day because I felt like my body was just betraying me. That's what it felt like. I just knew, it was like I grew up. It was funny because by that point I had already formed the expectation that was when my life was over. My life was going to get really bad for me after that point.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was kind of the attitude too around me was, and I remember my mother even, she tried really, really hard to try to not make it into a bad thing. I mean, it was the first day that she gave me a big glass of red wine, but I remember coming in and telling her that I was bleeding, and she goes, "Oh no!" That was the first reaction. I'm like,
it's so in the culture, eh?
oh yeah.
And it's so not right.
Well, it's not right at all. And I can tell you, in my life specifically, it led to absolute hell. I had endometriosis. I struggled with that and still actually do sometimes. So I have a real hard time every month when I'm bleeding, and I can tell you the thought patterns that it has to do with, and it's always just the minute that I start bleeding, I feel an instant internal resistance to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a level of fear, and it's interesting because I base my whole life, I mean, I'm the one who's out here teaching how to come into alignment all the time, and even I have resistance about the feminine energy. So you know how bad it is when somebody like me hasn't come to a reckoning about that.
So if others are experiencing that sort of thing, that are watching this show, a good thing to do is to ask, how young is this feeling?
Yes.
How young are you when you feel this? And go back to that little girl and hold her, take her out of that situation, and maybe re-educate her. Right? And don't put her back in the timeline. Just go out to the mountains somewhere and have a good time. But that little girl is still reacting, right?
Oh, and you know what's interesting? So I actually did that a few years ago, this technique that you're talking about, and what came up for me is that so my mother went through menopause early, and it was a really horrific process for her. She was raised the same kind of mentality about feminist type of stuff. So I watched her. I remember as a little girl, I was watching her just writhing around in pain, and that became my expectation about what it would be like for me. So I can see where the origin is. So I definitely strongly suggest people to go back and do exactly what you just suggested, because it's pretty surprising what will pop up for you in terms of what formed this kind of attitude and this fear about that process.
Yes. And it's just something that's gone through time, right from way back in ancient times.
Yes.
And has followed humanity up to this point. You know, it's just like this experience. Have you ever seen somebody that'll take a baby and throw them up in the air?
Yes.
And you wonder, why? Why are you throwing that baby? Well, I went in and tried to figure it out, and I took it all the way back to ancient times. They used to swaddle babies and throw them up in the air because they felt there was demons in them, and this is carried through. Because if you ask a person, like I've seen some men throw babies very, very high.
Oh yeah.
And I just walk up and say, oh, what, like, why did you throw that baby? Right? Come on. And he goes, well, I don't know. It's fun, right? And I'm going, yeah, for who? Like, the baby's scared to death, right? But you wonder, and then you find out that there's some tracking to this, that people are doing this because it's something that's followed along their timeline or their history.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly where our mentality about menstruation came from. It's evil, it's dirty, it's bad, it's shameful. Yep.
And it's not.
Uh-huh.
It's absolutely what's supposed to happen. It's natural. And if we take our perception and flip it and come back into it, all of a sudden, people aren't experiencing the horrific things that they...
Oh, yeah. And Sue, I'm glad you bring that up, too, because I've been doing a lot of practice around this just in my own life, seeing as how I get the opportunity every month. But I've noticed that my periods that are really hard are always the ones where I've got that negative mentality going into it. And like a couple times I did this thing. Now I'm getting so busy, of course, that I haven't been really taking the time. But I did this thing a couple times where when I realized what day I was going to start on, about 2 days before that, I would start sitting down with gratitude lists, and I would write my period on the top, and I'd just start writing gratitude lists about it. I was basically forcing myself to focus positively towards it instead of negatively. And what struck my mind in the beginning was how damn hard it was for me to come up with anything. I would just sort of sit there, and eventually the ball gets rolling and it becomes easier and easier, but those were always so much easier for me. I got a lot less pain, and it just, my body was kind of like happy about it instead of resisting that. It was really interesting to see.
Exactly. Women need to hear this, Teal, and start to do it, because that is, again, an old program that at the end of it only just gnaws away at self-esteem about who you are, and getting that out of the way and actually celebrating, right?
Yes, I agree with you. I think that it's time for us to start celebrating. It might be even nice for women to get together in groups and celebrate it. The problem is so often I've noticed, because I went to these, I love this sort of trend called the red tent, which is when you're on your period, you basically go into a sort of spiritual isolation and you're around other women. But the times that I went there, instead of it being nurturing, it just aligned me with the problem. It was like a whole group of women that were just super angry about the way that the universe viewed periods. So I left feeling worse. It wasn't like all of us got together and started trying to focus on how amazing it was and trying to work ourselves into the space of allowing, which is what it needs to be about. Not a bunch of women sitting together talking about how terrible it is that society treats it in this way.
I find that with most groups. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people with anxiety, and they come from anxiety groups, and I ask them what their group is about, and they say, well, we all sit around and talk about how many different ways we can be anxious. And I go, well, that's just...
Yes.